Hi all, and welcome at the CRM Stage conference. My name is Hanna Koseikina, and today I want to tell you about Lightning Web Components communication, how we can send data between components, and how that works if we are sending data from parent to child component, from child to parent, and for independent components as well. And a little bit about Aura components. But first of all, a few words about me. I'm senior Salesforce developer at Customertimes. I have 9 years of overall development experience and 8 years in Salesforce. So I have some experience of sending data back and forth when you use Visualforce or LWC components, all of those. When do we need to pass data between components? There is a big variety of possibilities or options when we need to do that. First thing when we need that is when we are passing data from parent component to child component. When parent component holds all the data, passes it down to the child component for the correct component generation. For example, if parent component is some web form and child component is some input field, and we want to pass the data, for example, if it is some lookup field, we are passing information from parent for what object will be this lookup. And should, for example, this input field be enabled, or it should be for some reason disabled. And as parent components holds all this data, it should pass it to child component. Other option, if we're sending information from parent to child or from child to parent, it's when child components make changes to some data and then sends it back to parent. Going back to our example with web form, when in input field some changes happens, value changes, some new values are added if it is a pick list, for example. And then we need to send that data back to parent so that when user presses on save button on a parent component, it knows what values should be saved. And other option is sending data between unrelated components. Let's say we have a Lightning page, and on Lightning page it's Lightning record page, and we have there custom component in header, custom component in right sidebar, but we want to use standard details, so that making of a big component which will hold all of those smaller components will not work for us. In this case, if we want to send some data from header to a site component, then in this case we need to have some approach to send the data. Let's go deeply to passing data from parent to child. So how it works. User enters some data on parent component and changes are reflected on child components. So as you can see, I have here a small demo of how it works. So when some test value is entered on a parent input field, it appears in output for child component. And how we can do that? First option is the default option, passing initial data as a parameters, or other option, how we can call it, it's public property. We define in child component some property with API decorator, and this makes this property a public property, so we can access it from parent component. And we set value from parent's HTML markup. So I have on a parent field, which I populate from text field. And then when this field, text field is populated, I pass it to child component in HTML, where I have value dash from dash parent and equals text field. Other option, which is Pretty same, I would say, is define the same public property, but with getter and setter. So we define two methods, get property name and set property name, also with API decorators. And then when the same text field changes on a parent component, I query child component in parent's controller and set the property from parent, just setting it directly from a controller. The same thing we can do for a public property. So if we have public property as defined in our previous slide, then we still can send data to it through the controller. And vice versa, if we have setter and getter, we also can pass data not from a parent's controller, but from parent's HTML markup. But of course, there are some limitations. And some good things. So let's start from good things. Setter methods allow us to use proxy for OR expressions replacement. So if you have some OR component with some expressions for accordion, for example, you can use this setter to create some proxy for those values. And in this case, we will have dynamic for each. So that you can see here, I pass as a child values 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 array, and I'm showing my child components in for each in HTML markup. And I have also in a child field which is called mod5, which shows mod5 for the value. And it's dynamically calculated in a setter, so that when child component accepts some value, it also makes mod5 of this value. And this allows us to show dynamically our child components with value with mod5, and it looks fine. And let's go to limitations. First thing is that setters for proxy are not reactive. So I have example where I've added button increment to my parent component, which should increment that list of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. And it's not sending data to child when I press increment, because my component doesn't have decorator track for this array, and because of that it doesn't return the parent and doesn't return the child. But other thing that if I have just text field and API primitive property, then it works and triggers update, and even when I do some changes to a text field, it also re-renders my array and its influence on child components. One more thing is that in JavaScript names are in camel case, and in HTML attributes they are in kebab case. So we need to consider that when we create some public property in child, we create it with camel case, but when we are sending value from parent through the HTML markup, we have to use kebab case. And one more very important thing for public properties is avoid changing those properties from child, because you will just get an exception. So when I put some value on a parent and then try to change it on a child, I get an error because Salesforce just doesn't allow that. Okay, let's go to the next method. We can call a public method on a child to pass some data. It looks like a more like setter. So we just create on a child some method with API decorator, not setter but regular method, and we can send the different parameters. And then when calling from parent this method on child, we just pass the needed value. So pretty simple. Don't think we have to go deeper in it. The main thing is that it, as a setter, gives us a great possibility to update some other fields with some custom logic. And in this case, if we update data from child, we will not have exception. So this is something we need in option when this value should be passed but can be changed. And let's go to passing data from child to parent. How it basically works, I have some text field on a child, and when I enter some value, it got reflected on a parent output. How we can do that? The best option, well, not the best, but the mainly used option is custom events publishing. In child methods, we create a custom event and publish it. Event name cannot use uppercase letters or spaces, so in my case, it's send data to parent, and on parent component, we add the event handler for the child. So it's working like we add handlers for on click or on value changed or something like that. In the same manner, we create here on send value to parent equals handle data. And in this event handler, we define what should happen with the data which is passed from a parent to child. In my example, it just saves data to value from child variable, and then this variable is shown on a parent component. The most interesting thing about custom events publishing is custom propagation options. By default, the propagation option is set to bubbles false, composed false, and bubbles variable defines if propagation should happen in DOM, and composed defines if propagation should happen in shadow. What does it mean? If no propagation in DOM, then in this case, if we put a child component on a parent into some div, for example, in this case, div doesn't receive the event, and if we have some grandparent component which holds in itself parent component, and this means that child component for this grandparent is hidden in shadows, then grandparent also doesn't get the event. I have here an example how it works. I have a child component with text field, and in parent component I have field for test value, and I also have another field which I've added with some text property which I've added in just for the div, and div just doesn't go to handler method, and grandparent also doesn't see anything. Next option, if we will set bubbles to true and compose to false. This will mean that event will propagate in the same DOM, but it will not cross the shadow. So if my child component again is in some div in parent component, then this div will get the event, and we can call there some handler and set value to one more property on parent and show it. But grandparent doesn't have this value. Of course, there is option to send value to grandparent. It's setting bubbles to true and compose to true. This means that event goes up through the DOM, crosses the shadow, and goes there up through the DOM to the root. And in this case, both div and grandparent gets the value. So that works that when I enter value on a child, it gets rendered in a parent, in a div which is there, and also on a grandparent. In this case, Also, important thing is stop propagation. So that if we have some big hierarchy of components, and at some point we decide that we want to stop event propagation, it shouldn't go upper, we can use event stop propagation in the same way how we do it for some custom events with stop default. Then here's same thing, prevent from default, better to say. The same thing here. Of course, Salesforce has some best practices about how custom event publishing should be implemented. First thing, if the elements are in the same shadow, then use event.target for custom properties. And if the elements are in different shadows, then use event detail, because in this case, event target will be different and it will not show us the correct values. If you need to use event detail, please use only primitive types, so that it will not be some objects sending in events. And before adding data to event detail, better to create new object or array and copy data there, because if you don't do that, data can get corrupted while executing some JavaScript. And of course, don't include non-primitives from API or wire to event detail for the same reason, because it can change in any moment. And whenever possible, avoid bubbles through and compose through, because it influences on performance of a component. So as you have seen, I don't have big components. It's just component which holds component which holds component. But when I was adding that to Lightning page, it was already showing me that the page is very slow, and please don't do something to it to make it faster. Even in some small components, it greatly influences on performance. And other option how we can pass data from child to parent is to pass parent method as a parameter. How we can do that? What is that? It's situation when we want to execute some method on a parent from child. For example, if we have different childs, but we don't want to implement separate methods because they all will use the same method to pass the data. In this case, we define in a child public property, which we then use in a child as a parent. So you just call it something like change the data or handle data, and when something happens on a child component, it just makes an impression that handle data is a method. We go to it as this.handleData and pass some value. And we need to implement this method on a parent component, make there some changes. And when property aka method is called on a child, it executes on parent. So the value which we pass to the method from a child goes directly to a parent and gets transformed there to anything we want. And passing data from independent components. Just to remind, it's when we have some components which are in different shadows, different DOMs, not related anyhow, just related as being placed on the same Lightning page, but without some direct connection. The first option, it's Lightning message service. So how it is, what it works? It basically works as some kind of bus, which is LMS channel. And here we have a schema that shows us 4 elements. And all of them are connected by LMS channels, but by different LMS channels. So let's say we have element 1, element 2, which are connected with LMS channel 1. and they can send some data through this channel between themselves. But other thing is LMS channel 2 between components element 2 and element 3, where it just goes from 2 to 3 and not vice versa. But from fourth component we can send data to third component and to second component. And all of that we can do by defining different LMS channels. And another great thing of what we can do with LMS channel is that we can connect Lightning Web components, Aura components, and Visualforce components. So that if we have some service components implemented in Aura and we don't want to re-implement it in LWC, we can use Lightning message servers just to update it and use it then in Lightning Web components. And how it works? If I enter something in one component which is placed in details on a Lightning page, it then sends data to another custom component which is placed in a header. So how we use a Lightning message service? First thing what we need to do is to create message channel. We create a XML file with extension message channel, or if you use VS Code, then it's message channel meta XML. Define some message fields which you want to use. In my case, it's value entered. And deploy it to the work through the IDE or through the aunt, or anyhow how you like it. And my message channel is called page state. I have it exposed because of course we need to have it exposed to use it. Description is message channel to pass page state, so that if some another developer comes to your project, he will know for what you need this message channel. And the Lightning message field, I have only one, but you can create more if you need it. Then we need to configure publisher component. And to do that, we import message channel which we have created, page state. We import publish and message component from Lightning message service, and we create message context property with wire decorator. And then in a needed method we create payload and call a publish method. Publish accepts message context, message channel, and the payload as the parameters. And you want to ask, what is message context? Message context is a thing which connects all of the components which are publishers or subscribers and use Lightning message service. So by this message context, Lightning message service defines if components are in the same context and if data should be sent to them. So that if different users have the same page opened, they will not receive messages from another users. And here how it looks in code. So I import Lightning element wire, I import page state message channel, import publish and message context, wire message context, and then handle change. It's a method which is called on changing value on a text field, and it creates payload. Value entered is set to event detail value. And then event is published. Sorry. And after we defined the publisher component, we need to define subscriber component. Structure looks pretty the same. We import message channel. We import subscribe instead of publish and message context from Lightning message service. Again, create message context property with wire decorator. Create separate variable for the subscription and implement listener method, which will be reacting to the message. And just subscribe to the Lightning message Lightning message service in a connected callback method. Subscribe accepts again message context, message channel, and the listener. So what is the listener? It's some method on our subscriber component which receives just message and or some text or something like that, and just handles it like we had some handlers in our components. And when we create subscription, just let's go to the next tile. When we create subscription, we save result of method subscribe, which is returned by Lightning message service, to a separate property subscription. And this means that when some event comes through the message channel, which is page state in our case, it will execute handle message method, which will just do something with the message. Pretty simple. Of course, we have some considerations. For now, Lightning message server supports only the following. It's Lightning Experience standard navigation, it's Lightning Experience console navigation, and if we have Salesforce mobile app for Aura and LWC, this means we cannot add the visual force with Lightning message service. It will work only on desktop. Lightning components also can be used in Experience Builder sites, but it's only as a beta. And in 1GP and 2GP packages, Lightning message service also works. But of course, we have a lot of components which do not support for now Lightning message service. And there is a way how we can use it too. And this is PubSub or publish subscribe pattern. It looks a lot like Lightning message service. We have publisher. It sends message with the data to some publish subscribe channel, and then that message is sent to all of the subscribers which are subscribed to that channel. So it's kind of outdated Lightning message service. So to use PubSub, you first need to download a special JavaScript file and deploy it to your work. So this is not some scam. It's a file which is referenced in Salesforce documentation. So everything is okay for you. Don't be afraid. And it's just one JavaScript file without any HTML or something like that. And how we do that? It looks a lot the same to Lightning message service. The difference is that instead of message context, current page reference is used. And we need to import Fire event from the PubSub module to publisher. Import current page reference from navigation and wire to it. And when some changes happen, we create message, which is the same like payload which I had for Lightning message service, and call Fire event in this needed method where we pass as a parameters page reference, we pass event name, and we pass message. So here event name is used as a channel so that we know what event is passed. And in a subscriber, we do the following. We import register listener from PubSub, and if you need, we import unregistered listeners. Import from navigation, again, current page reference, wire to it, and we implement some message handling and register listener in a connected callback. So it looks pretty the same as how it was done for Lightning message servers, where we were subscribing to some channels, and here we just register listener. We pass the event name so that we know for which event this listener is used. We pass the method which is used for handling the data, and we pass their context. Other option is quite not popular, but I've met it. It's passing data through URL parameters. And for example, one specific example, we have some parent object, which is called, for example, product. And this parent has some child, some details, some other products, or maybe some attributes of a product like size, color, something like that, but done not as a fields, but as a separate objects. And let's say product, which is, I don't know, t-shirt, will have child which will be t-shirt but with attributes blue. So that blue t-shirt is not the same object as t-shirt, but it's related to it directly. And we want to make it in that way that if we open detail page of a product t-shirt, we can see there its child, and if we click, for example, on a blue t-shirt, we will still see the header of a product. We will not be navigated to another page. We will still on the same page, but we will see details of this blue t-shirt. And in this case, we can use URL to define what exactly child records should be shown, so that we have in URL ID of a parent product t-shirt, but we have there some parameter which will be called child name and or child ID, and it will have ID of a blue t-shirt. And if a page will be refreshed for some reason, user will still see the child which he selected to see. And to do that, we use just this simple way. We get URL which we have. We get the parameter which we can set, and then we do window history replace state, where we replaced URL with a changed URL parameter. And on a on a component which need to get this URL value, if it's something which should be done on init of the page, then we wire to current page reference and get this value from a parameter. And of course, don't forget to use C __ before the parameter name, because otherwise it just will not return you anything. You will get undefined value. And other option, if you want to get this value while doing something, you can press on some button, and this button will call refresh data or something like that, which will get URL parameter value and save it somewhere on your component. And of course, talking about sending data between independent components, we cannot amend talking about Aura service components. How we can use it? So we can create ES6 service component, which is basically a JavaScript file with some methods which will be then used by LWC and Aura components. And if you want to use it in a LWC, you just import it in reference in the same way as we imported PubSub, for example. And if you want to use it in Aura component, then you just import it as Aura component and call the needed methods, as we've done a lot of times in our life. Let's look at this as an example for Workspace API. So to start, we need to create a Lightning message service channel, which will be used to communicate between Aura and LWC. In my case, I'm showing example of Workspace API to change name of the tab in a console app, so that by default it has name of the record, and by calling some methods from Aura, I will rename tab to ID of a record. So what we are passing through the Lightning message service is a record ID and record data, which is current data representing the record which has changed. And I call it connect Aura and LWC message channel. And in an Aura component, we will create a component which provides methods for the APIs, defines the handling method for the message. I reference here, for example, some different APIs. It's navigation item API, workspace API, utility bar API, and I have subscription to, not subscription, I have attribute message channel with the type connect Aura and LWC __ C. And I define handling for it on message to call the handle changed and scope application. And here is a controller. So on init, I check if it's page flexi page editor or if it's regular page, so that on flexi page editor we have some description shown of a component and nothing shown for regular pages. And in handle changed, I get record ID from a message and then use Workspace API to update tab ID for the current tab. Then I create Lightning web component which publishes Lightning message service, Lightning message channel, and I wire to message context again. I import publish message context and connector channel. And I have here a method which is publish message from LWC, which creates some payload with record ID and publishes this message. And I use this method to be called on a button click. So what we need to do is to place Aura and Lightning Web Component on a Lightning page, so that they are on the same Lightning page. And then when I press on a button Publish from LWC, tab name from test is changed to account ID. And the same we can do with all other APIs, which are pretty handful, but we have it in Aura and not yet in LWC. And the new thing which was presented not so far ago is dynamic interactions in a Lightning App Builder. So what is that? It's a possibility on getting more abilities to the admin, and in this case some things which are usually done by developers can be done by admins. In case if we have some custom component on a page which publishes some event and we want it to send data to some other components, even maybe some standard components, maybe in future it will be for standard components, which are there on a Lightning page. And then when developer defines the event, admin can configure the event by setting up the interactions. What are main blocks for dynamic interactions? It's event, anything that can trigger interaction. It's mouse click, button press, change in a field's value, anything that you think that should trigger the interaction on your custom component. Interaction is basically activity which happens between the source and the target. Source is an item which is triggering the event. Currently, it can be only custom Lightning Web components and the dynamic action bar component as a pilot. Aura component, for example, for now cannot be source for the interaction. And target its item, which is the target of an interaction. It's any component on a Lightning page. So even standard or components can be a target. So how we do this? Developer creates custom component and exposes the event. So I have handle click and I have fire event where I put some data and bubbles and compost are set to true so that it crosses DOM and it crosses the shadow. And then it comes to admin. Custom component where this event is published should be put to a page and it will be of course source. We need to have some, for example, custom component which will be a target for the event. And after that, when you click on a custom component which is source, there is new tab near properties which is called interactions. And under the desired event, you can click Add Interaction button, select the interaction, and select a target for it. It's our new second component. And configure the target properties. So the values which we send in our custom event can be mapped to different variables, different properties on a target. And we can use expressions. Expressions for now can start only from event dot. And if we have on an event different fields, we can select what exactly should be mapped to what exactly field on a target component. Let's look at an example. I have Lightning page. It has three components: application list, application detail, and contact detail. Application list is a LWC component which on click publishes event, and application detail and contact detail have handlers for that event. That means that if I click on an application list, it publishes the event, and then as an admin, I configured interactions to update properties on application detail and contact detail so that those two components get the data and gets displayed on a page. Of course, dynamic interactions are now very limited, and we have there some considerations and limitations as it's something brand new. Informational components with target components are ignored when the target components are shown in the event property editor. If you use some dynamic interactions on your Lightning page and you want to switch to another page template, then list of available templates will show only templates that already support dynamic interactions. If you send data to an OR component, then it will re-render on getting the data, so you need to consider it to not to send the event if you don't want to lose some data without saving. When you use expression in rich text editor, then autocomplete will not work for it. And after a component's event metadata is used on a Lightning page or released as a part of managed package, that means that some breaking changes are not allowed, like removing of event or renaming a property or changing property type is not allowed. And some more limitations is that for now dynamic interactions are supported only on app pages, so we cannot put it to some other pages. Only LWC components again can be source components, but Aura or LWC can be target. Dynamic interactions are not supported on pages which are based on custom page template. So getting back to that point that if you want to switch template, it will show only those templates, some standard templates which support dynamic interactions. Only string and rich text type properties can use expressions to define their values. The required property restriction isn't respected when defining a new value for a target property, regardless of its type or whether it's defined with an expression. So even if you don't save there some data, it will not error. And event is the only context supported for expressions and interactions. This is something which I mentioned. So when we use expressions, we always started from event dot something. Also, expressions can be used for properties of string, integer, and boolean, and no others. You cannot set target property value as an array or list of values. So again, just string, integer, and boolean. And you can set a target property value of a string attribute to empty using metadata API, but not in a Lightning App Builder UI. Also, dynamic directions for now doesn't work in mobile only app or in legacy tablet mode mobile experience. And when a dependent property is auto-populated, then auto-populated value isn't saved unless you click on the dependent property field by tabbing it or by clicking directly as a mouse. So that's basically it. What I wanted to share about Lightning Lightning Web Component communication, and a little bit about Aura. Please let me know in case of any questions. Thank you for your attention. You can reach me through my email or any other ways. Thank you. Bye.